Do you think media has a role with regards to that? Because for me, when I used to teach journalism, I taught journalism at Damlin, at Rosebank College as well. And I always told my students, media doesn't always have to be bad. Even if the story comes across as bad, there's always an angle that you choose where you can show some light. So do you feel, currently that media perpetuates, and because of the socioeconomics and because it comes across as bad news, it has an effect on the culture?
Yes. I don't believe in blaming all of society's misdeeds on media perpetuation. I mean, unfortunately, we have to tell the bad news. But I think also what you said, absolutely, we do play a very, very, very powerful role in terms of perpetuating certain stereotypes. And one of those stereotypes also, as you talk about, whether it's Hanover Park or Mitchell's Plain or Lavender Hill, is the sense that this is a community, that these are communities without agency. These are communities that are so dispossessed that they have no sense of hope for the future, which in certain respects, yes, if you are living with the daily reality of gang wars and crime and violence, of course, it's going to induce what I call a state of traumatization. You're traumatized. Your trauma is normalized.
Desensitized, as they say.
But within the communities, and I've got a case in point, one of the most beautiful, rewarding stories that I've ever done, it might not have been the best done story I've ever done, but it was certainly in terms of outcomes, was going into a place like Lavender Hill, where you talk about open fields. There was a battlefield there called, it was in Blode Street, okay, and it was sort of like the battlefield of Blode Street, and it served as a buffer between warring gangs. But unfortunately, they would also shoot each other across this field, and hundreds and hundreds of children and adults would get caught in the crossfire. Anyway, long story short, community impetus, vision, dynamism, resilience, tenacity has resulted in that field now being converted into a community hub. So the field is still there, the dynamics are still there, the gangs are still there, but the energy and the mindset has completely shifted. I'm not saying it's going to be a cure-all, but instead of it being a place of blood, the battlefield is now a place of hope and healing.
But it's the power of one. You have to start with one. One hub creates another one. And I think that's the... Okay, there's the story.
Are you psychic?
So we just pull the stories up as we talk about them, which is cool.
Level up.
That was one of the most rewarding stories I've ever done, because the city of Cape Town had been dragging its feet in getting the lease sorted out for the community, and we just went hard on them, and as a result they had to commit to actually putting their weight behind this. The city's not funding this battlefield at all, but they certainly... the field is in, I think, the second stage of development now, but they still need to raise funds to get it into the third stage of development.
With regards to education and journalism and tech, how could that be a tool? Because as you said, before 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it wasn't possible to publish an article. But now someone has a camera, they can take a picture, they can write a story, and they can release it through social media. So how important do you think, number one, media is, and also should people be encouraged to tell stories?
Let me answer the last part first. Yes, absolutely, definitely. Be encouraged to tell stories. And technology has facilitated the ability, the means, the medium by which to tell those stories, whether it's through social media. But it's a double-headed beast because, as I said, there's still one underlying principle that should inform all journalism. And we're not talking about fiction. We're not talking about, even satire. What informs satire is an underlying truth.
We spoke about it even over.
And this is where it becomes the landscape of journalism has changed so irrevocably because of social media, because of the ease with which people have access to those tools that are there to inform, but are equally there to disinform. And what has happened with journalists now, whereas before, when I started out, I mean, we had traditional beats. We had crime, we had health, we had whatever, with education. Now, I mean, there are entire departments, divisions in media houses dedicated to deconstructing disinformation.
Do you think the entertainment beat has taken over? Because if you look at a lot of podcasts, a lot of stories, a lot of the media, I mean, the most searched content on social media is cats. You know, so do you think that because media is so freely available that it's become very entertainment based and not informational and educational based?
I think it's become horribly narcissistic. You know, I think it's become, it's not the self anymore. It's the selfie.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
No.
It's
That's
not.
the one.
It's not spreading the influence. It's the influencer.
Okay.
And I think it's very much it's so concentrated on a me kind of putting myself not out there, but putting myself in sort of almost using sort of, how can I put it? Putting out a Botoxed version of myself. And that is a huge danger. There's that, and then of course there is the very real threat of how dangerous disinformation can be. And without some kind of regularization or regulation or some means of fact checking, this world would be even crazier than it is, and it's pretty crazy at the moment.
Do you think the fact checking is important, or do you think it's important that people are informed and educated enough to understand and be able to see through the bullshit?
Both.
You know, because one of the issues we had during COVID that a lot of people, including journalists, that they weren't happy about is, with the whole Facebook thing where a lot of information was hidden or taken off because it was seen as disinformation. For example, when during the pandemic, I tried to share information that I felt was opposing to what the World Health Organization put out there. And this wasn't information that I shared. This was information that doctors and psychologists and professionals shared. And a lot of people, including Facebook, they took my post off and they said you're spreading disinformation. So I think we also have to be very careful because it could be disinformation to us, but...
Man's on the Zuckerberg list.
Yeah.
I think that there's a
On the Zuckerberg list.
I think there's a huge difference between dissent, and one should have the freedom to give a dissenting opinion or discourse, and disinformation. Huge difference.
Okay.
And also because that's also about intent as well. Because all those purveyors of disinformation, I'm not even saying misinformation, are not always doing it because they just are questioning the most popular narrative. They're doing it because they've got an agenda. And one has to also ideally examine every single thing that is put out there by a media organization or by social media. But people don't. People are lazy. People take third, fourth, fifth-hand sources. Yeah. It is such a sort of monosyllabic kind of response. You either like or you unlike, or it's an emoji-driven world, and that is not what I believe to journalism.
Do you know what makes podcasting so beautiful, and why I think it's a big medium? You gave me the clear definition now. It's because now we can discuss. There's discourse on media. There's a reaction. On social media, or at least, or most media, you can't actually react. Social media gave us the capability to react. But I think with podcasting, it has this vulnerability. You obviously need to speak, but you can be ridiculed or you can be challenged. So with regards to the podcasting format as well, something that I like about it as well is that you need to not just educate, but there is a certain level of, there is entertainment because it's someone and we're talking, but the entertainment is not the most important thing. It's not just to catch the eye. that there needs to be some substance. And do you think that the reason why podcasting is so popular these days is because of the information that it gives and the discourse? Is media heading into that direction?
I think I think it's a very positive direction. I think there's a lot more freedom, and one doesn't have to go through the formal strictures of a sort of a mainstream media platform in order to be heard. And that's why through podcasting, I think that it's more informal, it is more spontaneous, I presume. And it does allow one the freedom to take the listener stroke, viewer stroke, audience stroke, public into domains that are not accessible through mainstream media or the conventional media that we're used to. So
I think for me, it's the melting pot. The podcast has become the melting pot, where everything has become streamlined. Like I know radio, when you were listening to the lady at the radio conference, I'm like, okay, so it's obviously, I know everything's psychological, certain ads play at certain times and but to hear it, like, she was hitting with you got to play it at this time because people's in the traffic and the blah, 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 blah. So for me, it's like, okay, this is a bit very structured. So if I want to come in here with the kids, right? So shout out to Cape Conscious Media, Saturday, the Blast podcast was shot. So the kids were sitting here and they were so natural. But I can't take them to radio because when can they be on radio? And
also radio is dependent on advertisers.
And they're going to say the kids are too young, and they're going to say the kids gone because they still need to go for training. And myself and Nanto, like he messaged me as soon as I got in, there was a message from Nanto, like, I'm going to learn so much from this experience. Because who better to learn from? And we literally gave them 8 minutes. They went, gave them some tips, be mindful of speaking, the question, boop, 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 boop. And they let it run. They're speaking for 45 minutes. They were like us. They nailed it. And afterwards, we were like, you even asked, like, did you prepare? I'm like, no, they just went. They were like, okay, let's go back to the market day. Let's go back to talk about this. Then they go on a tangent. Then they come back. And when they rewatched it, now this is the gem. When they rewatched it, there was a moment of, look, and the others are laughing. But then there's a moment of, they're just listening. And then I was like, here we go. That's what they were talking about. The others saw them. And that's where that fact check, that realness of podcasting. We can't teach that. I'm looking at them and I'm looking at their body and their demeanor and they're comfortable and their hands and they just world class. Like they've been sitting here forever. So are we gonna wait till he leaves school? Doesn't know what he wants to go do, doesn't agree that he don't want to do, like me also.
He has to unlearn everything that he's learned.
Or you can decide now. One of the principles I teach with him is find out quick. So whatever you're doing, find out quick. If you want to be a journalist now, like now I'm getting they all sending me their blogs, so they just posting now because now it's like, it's real. They've all got blogs. They literally post like 8 articles in the past 2 days because now it's like, what? Blog, post,
it's right there.
Boom, here's the link. Boom. It's real. So again, podcasting, blogging again is not in the 2022 school curriculum.
In 2 years ago, I was teaching journalism and we were using a 2016 textbook. We were teaching them radio as one of the main mediums, and the other one was newspaper writing or news writing. And I asked them, my first question was, when last did you buy a newspaper? None of them could even answer me. And the second question was, do you guys listen to the radio? What your favorite radio station was? They had to suck it out of their thumb. And I said, so I'm Chad and I'm going to be your journalism lecturer. And I actually had to split my time. I had to ensure that they passed the exam by teaching them that content. But at the same time, I had to introduce them to Canva. I had to introduce them to, podcasting. I had to give them
to new media.
Shout out to still no email in the syllabus.
Yeah. So the last question, Hazel, before we wrap up, where is media heading? What is the future, and what do we need to do as educators and journalists that have been in the field for years to ensure that the profession and that media moves in the right direction?
I think that now more than ever, and I'm sure it also sounds like a cliche, journalism is needed more than ever. And when I say true journalism, I'm not saying true journalism in terms of kind of mainstream epithets, but I'm saying the desire to investigate, the desire to probe, the desire to tell stories, the desire to make a difference. All those principles that propel us into journalism in the first place are more imperative than ever, because we're living in a world where we are in the middle of, and I don't want to quote Alex Jones because I hate him, but we're in the middle of
Love hate. I can see love it because you're quoting him.
We are in the middle of info wars, and it is imperative. It's imperative for not only our generation but for future generations. We've got a planet that is worth saving, that is worth changing, that is worth sustaining, and if we don't act not in blind, passive consensus, but in a way that really, really constructively galvanizes people to be more aware, to take action, to be citizen activists, then we are lost.